Hi, it's Therese, and for the March Altenew challenge, we're going abroad to France. So I thought it'd be really pretty to have some pink flowers, which really suit the inspiration. I really love the pink and the green together, so I thought it'd be fun to make some watercolor pink flowers. And you don't really need to have all the fancy watercolor equipment, even though it's always fun to have lots of goodies. What I wanted to share with you today is you can simply just use your inks. Now these are the Altenew crisp inks, and they're a water-based ink, so they're perfect for this technique, and such pretty colours too. I'm using the cotton candy, coral berry and ruby red, and I've added lots of water. So I'm working on some watercolour cardstock, and I'm adding the water to my cardstock first, and then picking up the colour with the paintbrush and just literally dropping it onto the cardstock where it's wet, and then just letting the colour spread out. So nothing too technical here, keeping it really simple. I haven't even bothered having like two sections of water. I've actually just using the one lot of water here because my colours are so similar. I didn't normally have two lots of water, one for a clean and one for washing my brushes out. So because the colours are so similar, I'm not bothering to even muck around with that. Now I'm just going to set this aside to dry, and then I can start working on the rest of my card. And I've got this awesome die which is called it's a cover die, it's a shutter cover die, so it has these really cool sort of shutter lines in it, and I'm using some American Crafts cardstock. This is an olive green. I'm just going to run that through my die cutting machine, and to actually lift the die out I'm using some low tack tape. It just helps me. You could use a little blade or give it a tap and see how you go, but I find that the tape works really well. And now my colour for my flowers is dry. I've got the wild hibiscus set, and I don't want, because the shutter die is actually so bold, I'm using a very plain flower, like it has almost a sketchy look about it, and I thought that would work really well with that watercolor look. And I've got my jet black ink, and just because this is a watercolor cardstock, I am going to just test it off to the side and make sure that it's going to stamp well. It is a fairly smooth cardstock, and I could use the Misty if I was worried about how it was going to stamp, but it seemed to stamp out quite easily. So I'm literally just going to keep adding, stamping the flowers over top of my watercolor splotches, and I'm not worried if they're not perfectly stamped out. Do you know what I mean? Like not worried if the flowers aren't perfectly pink, if there's little bits of white showing around the edges. I thought it'll just give it that more of a sketchy look. And then I can just simply use I've got these spring assisted scissors, which are really great to fussy cut with, and I can simply just cut out all of my flowers, leaving just a small white border, even though the border is not white all around it. And I won't make you sit through all of this because it takes me quite a while to do, but basically I do that for all three flowers. Now I'm covering the front of my card, which is cut the same size as the shutter cover die, and I've got some, I think it's called Mint. It's another American Crafts cardstock, and it's a paler green, and I'm using my ATG gun just to add some adhesive to the back of that. And then to adhere my cover die, I like to use the Tombow liquid glue, because I find it actually, even though it does have that residual stick if you get too much on, so I'm only putting little tiny dots, I find that it actually sticks a lot quicker than the matte medium. And I'm too impatient sometimes to wait for the matte medium to dry. Although it holds so strongly, and you can simply, if you do only have the matte medium, use that, but just sit something on top of the actual die cut and give a little bit of time to dry before you start working on it, on the rest of your card. So for my sentiment, I've got this perfectly wonderful stamp. It's from the UR set, and I want to emboss this with some white embossing powder. So I'm using my Versamark ink, and I'm using a little piece of just scrap vellum and stamping that out. You know, I like to stamp along the bottom edge of my whatever I'm stamping on, so that way I know that I'm stamping straight. And then I've only got to do one cut when I cut it out. I know, is that lazy? Works well. I like it. And this is the Wow Opaque Bright White embossing powder, which I'm trying out for the first time, and it's a really super fine embossing powder, and I really like the way it it's a really nice bright white. Some of the embossing powders have a little bit of a yellow tinge to them. So I'll just cut that into a banner, and then I'm going to start assembling my card. And I've got my Tombow stamp runner here, just adding a little bit of adhesive behind the back of one of the flowers. And then I can just sort of hover it over where I need to and then pick up the vellum, and that way I won't need to actually use any adhesive behind the vellum, because that's always hard to do because you don't want it to show, because some of the adhesives will turn yellow over time, and if you're not going to use your card straight away, and you don't really, or if some people like to keep your cards, you don't want the sentiments, you know, turning yellow. Wouldn't be very pretty. And then I've got some glue dots. Because this is an uneven background, the glue dots I find have a really strong adhesive, so I've popped a couple behind that flower and just working out my placement for the other two. And we all know that things look good in odd numbers, so that's why I've chosen to do 3 flowers. And this is a 1mm double-sided foam tape that I'm adding to the top flower. And then just to pop up the second flower a little bit more, I'm actually using a bit thicker foam tape. It's a 2mm one. I just thought it'd actually be easier to put the tape directly to the card front, and that way I'm not trying to work out where the leaves are going to be sitting and accidentally sort of sticking it on an angle. And once I'm happy with the placement, I can just put some pressure and move it around a lot. That's what I do. Always do that. And when I'm happy, then I put some pressure on the flowers and make sure that the adhesive is going to stick to the background. And as a final touch, I'm going to add some licorice sprinkles to the center of my flowers. I was going to use some sort of pearly colour beads, but when I started sort of placing them on at the end, they just didn't look, they didn't have the wow factor. So I thought, I just sort of played around, and I thought that the black really just added that bold touch to the center of the flowers, so I went with that. Now these sprinkles are flat on the back, so they adhere beautifully to the card, especially when you use this matte medium. It has a really strong hold. And that's pretty much it for my card today. Thanks for joining me. I can't wait to see how you are inspired by the March challenge at Altenew. I look forward to seeing you there. So till next time, happy paper crafting. Bye.